So one of the main benefits of us doing the show once a week instead of twice a week, not counting last week where we did a Tuesday by accident. We're not going to talk about that. Shh. And I'm sure we'll mess up and do additional episodes in the future.
Probably.
But the benefits of doing once a week the show, I think it's helping me a lot because I can put a little more time into the episodes. You've mentioned that same problem.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it also means that we have more time to watch stuff and read stuff and experience more art. And, some things we then bring to the show. But it also means we can burn through the watch later lists that we've had running for literally years.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And part of that backlog is a lot of horror movies.
Totally.
Because we didn't really get into horror until we started doing this show.
I was going to say, really not until, around 2020. Like, we had vaguely been interested in fans before, but we really dug in while doing this show.
If that's like 50 or 60 years of movies that are in sort of the kind of cultural language that we've been talking about in horror, that's a big TBR that we've developed.
Got a lot of catching up, yeah.
So today we're discussing one of those movies that we finally got to watch, which is The Descent from 2005, written and directed by Neil Marshall. Now, if you're like us, a horror and a fantasy fan, you will know Neil Marshall from his work on Game of Thrones.
Yes.
He was one of their early big action directors. So he's the guy they brought in at the end of season 2 to do Blackwater. And then in season 4 to do The Watchers on the Wall.
Yeah.
So incredibly talented with like freaky things running around in the dark and stuff blowing up. And
yeah, when we were between, we were like, should we watch The Descent or it was something else? And we were like trying to decide, and Cam read off the directors. He was like, Neil Marshall, the guy who did Watchers on the Wall. I was like, oh, we're watching The Descent. Like that's decided. Like that's what we're gonna do. And it was such the right choice. I loved this movie.
Oh, me too. And as a little anecdote, I moved the spoilery stuff to the end of the discussion because I want to sell you on this if you haven't seen this already.
Truly.
And maybe an anecdote to help get us there is a little story time. So,
oh, I know exactly what you're about to say.
It's a group of friends, a group of women who go cave diving, and everything goes wrong, and there's freaky bad people, monster things in the cave.
Yeah,
that's the pitch for the movie. It's great. Go see it.
Yeah,
or rent it, I guess, since it's from 2005.
Yeah, go back in time, take a time machine to 17 years ago. So 18 years ago.
He's such a master of tension and action and fear that you don't see the monsters for a long time. And the big reveal when you finally see one of them, it's like a kind of headlamp flashing light thing.
It's like through the lens of the camera they have. So it's in like night vision. So it's like really creepy anyway.
It's one of the monsters, which is kind of like a humanoid thing, all hulked up behind one of the cave divers. So by this point in the movie, you're absolutely terrified.
Yeah, because
and riveted.
The tension has been building up for like 45 solid minutes.
Which is my way of saying Maggie was distressed.
I was very distressed. I was having a great time, but this is the kind of movie that really scares me. When there's like lots of darkness and like things going wrong. You don't know what to expect, what's going to jump out at you. And I knew there were freaky creatures in this and we hadn't seen them yet. So I was like prepared to be terrified.
And you're usually better at these things. You're usually more resistant to this, but this one got you.
This one got me.
So you were like koala-like latched onto me.
On the couch.
So this terrifying thing pops up behind one of our characters, way too close to our heroes. We think, they're about to die, and what is this thing? So Maggie yells and jerks my chest forward. So I get the full 4D experience of this thing.
You're welcome.
I get the visual of the freaky monster, the screaming in my ear, and Maggie python grabbing my chest.
I did that for you. You were always talking about how you want, to have elevated theatrical experiences. Sure. Well, I did that just for you. The yell that I uttered as well was a really inhuman noise.
Yes.
It wasn't like I didn't scream. Mm-mm. I didn't go, I went like, ha!
I remember.
It was a really strange noise that I made, very outside of my control. I'm really sorry about that.
So that might be Cam. A good. No, it was great, and now it's what I remember of the movie.
But if that tells you, this movie was scary.
Oh yeah, because we're pretty
scary.
We're pretty desensitized.
I've got a high tolerance at this point. I really do. I'm impressed with myself, but this one really freaked me out.
And the big takeaway from this film was the creature design, what they look like, and how they're used. They're sort of. I guess they move kind of like fast zombies or animals. They're like a bunch of golems in this
Sure.
cave because they're sort of humans, but they're like warped and evolved to live underground. They're blind. They've got this bleached out skin.
Yeah.
But the look is incredible. The
Totally.
presence of them is incredible. They
Yeah.
have that oh shit factor every single time they're on screen, or even if you hear like scratching nearby,
Yeah.
if you see a silhouette. And we were looking at the trivia on IMDb for the movie, and we saw that these creatures are played by actors, not stuntmen,
Right.
which is very unusual. And apparently this was Neil Marshall's effort to prioritize the characterization of the creatures, to have actors develop individual personalities.
Right, because they're meant to be human-like creatures. They're
Right.
not just animals, so they kind of have their own individual personalities.
And unlike zombies, they feel like recurring characters because so much of it is this chase, this hide and seek of them stalking different members of the group.
Right.
So you kind of do get to know them and you watch them very closely. So having that added characterization really pays off.
Yes.
And I was trying to work through this thought because it kind of sounds stupid initially, but bear with me for a second. This movie is not just content with having face shots of fantastic creature design. Because there are a lot of projects that have really good practical effects or whatever, and they just kind of leave the camera there.
Right.
And it works because there are some characters, there are some visuals or designs in TV and film that are so magnetic that they don't need to do anything. And trying to come up with examples of that, I fell on the trend very quickly of Darth Vader's helmet, Michael Myers' mask,
Yeah.
or anything to do with Leatherface, the Cenobites from Hellraiser, Jason's mask, Art the Clown doing anything. Most of the
Right.
horror icons, most of the scary things that are just magnetic. You have to look at it because you have to know what it's doing in
Yeah.
case it's like going to sneak up and be behind you.
Sure.
But they're also just amazingly designed.
Yeah.
This movie, The Descent, goes further by giving you these flashes or fragments of the creatures. Eventually you'll see the whole thing, but
Yeah.
the way they're introduced, they're these like memory-seared poses or moments. Like the monster entering a cave clearing and sniffing and looking around. But one of our divers is playing dead and hiding.
Yeah.
So it's standing on her head.
Yeah. Oh, that was so
Like-
freaky. Yeah, that was good.
It's like a bronze statue. That image, that pose, it's such a full-bodied physical thing
Right.
that like they could have just put the camera on the creatures and had them doing the slow crawl through caves for the whole movie. But those poses or shots like that, I mean, they're almost like action figures.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
I remember poses, and I feel like I don't have those sort of memories for a lot of other horror villains.
Totally. And I also was really impressed by the fact that even after all of those like slow, like careful, you only get fragments of them, even after we had fully, okay, we know what these creatures look like.
Right.
When we saw them over and over again, I still found them really scary.
Yes.
That's hard to do because usually if you've given it away too quickly, you can't sustain the fear because the whole point is like you don't know what it looks like or what it is. So if you've seen the whole thing, it kind of stops being scary. We've experienced that in other movies before where it kind of loses its impact.
Right.
But somehow, I guess because of the nature of like how they hide in the dark and pop out and you don't know how many of them there are. It's not just one. There are
Right.
dozens, if not hundreds down there. And so you don't know where they are. And so that tension and that fear of them was sustained. And I think they're designed so well that even if you've been looking at it over and over, it's still terrifying to see.
You get all of these fragmented reveal shots, and they feel like those kind of flashlight moments or through the view screen of the old, video camera that they have. But those shots and, teeth or all the different elements, they almost become Polaroids in your memory.
Yeah.
Where you're constructing and remembering all the freaky parts of this. And when you see the full creature and then you see fragments later, somehow it works every time with the same punch. Yeah, to double down on that horror fantasy connection. This introduction is what Tolkien does with Shelob.
Right. Yeah.
And the movies didn't really have the time to do that fully.
That is like one of the most, after doing our whole Tolkien journey, that's like one of the biggest disappointments for the movies was the way that Shelob is done. Not that Shelob is done
Right.
poorly, but it's so much better in the books.
Weirdly, the
Yeah.
Lego Lord of the Rings game does this Shelob introduction perfectly.
You're very right. Yeah, it does it pretty well.
But this movie sort of it doubles down on that idea.
Yeah.
Because instead of just being in that one little cave for Shelob, this is a series of caves, and the entire movie's there. So you have nothing but time in that setting, and it plays on those same strengths.
Yeah.
Especially because you only get like extended shots of these creatures when our characters are playing dead. So you get to see them creep by from these weird angles. If someone's holding their breath and it's walking on top of them, there's this element of stillness. Even though we're always seeing them, the creatures moving, we're only noticing them in the shadows because they're moving. But there's this element of stillness and frozen fear.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it doubles down on the wild claustrophobia of every single scene in the movie.
Sure, yeah. Well, and I was going to say it's really interesting to have those like more slowed down scenes when like after like when the creatures first like make their big appearance. It's a big messy action scene. You can't really get a good look at them. There's lots of fighting, lots of confusion, and everyone kind of scatters, and some things happen. And so then like that's only like the first like that's the beginning of this conflict with these things, and it continues for a long time after that. And the fact that it slows down into those moments of stillness and quiet, and like literally quiet, because they have to be silent because these things are blind but they can hear, but to do that and still maintain and sustain that tension and terror is really pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The claustrophobia, I want to zoom in on that element a little bit more.
Yes.
Because the feeling you get from this movie, 90% of the movies in those caves, maybe 99% of the movies in those caves.
Yeah.
And 5 minutes into the first dive, before anyone realizes anything is wrong, I was out.
I was like, absolutely not. I would never, ever do this.
My breathing was tighter. My eyes were wider. My stomach was all tensed up.
And like, I've never been a person I know that people have claustrophobia. My mom has claustrophobia, and it really affects her life. And I'm like, that sucks, but I don't experience that. Right. And so I'm like, I can't really comprehend what that's like. But watching this movie, I was like, oh yeah, I get that. This is horrible. Right. Like, this is really, really terrifying.
It has that infectious quality where you don't need to have a predisposition towards claustrophobia to be hit by this. Like, for anyone going in watching this thing, it's a horror movie way before the monsters show up. Yeah,
that's the thing. Like, because I was gonna say at the top of this episode, I mean, we've ruined it now, but I knew about this movie before we watched it. I had seen images of the creatures before, so I knew kind of what to expect. I mean, the movie still blew me away and was very unexpected in many ways, but I kind of wish I hadn't known about the creatures, because when I was reading into the history, from what I can tell, when this movie was put out, the marketing really didn't tell you that there were creatures.
That's awesome.
So you're just led to think, oh, these girls just get stuck in a cave. And like, that's the scariest part. And that's really how the movie starts out, right? Because it's like, oh, they're going to go on this expedition. You see Juno leave the guidebook in the car. Oh, they're going to get lost. And you see things go wrong. Cave-ins happen. Things get turned around. They don't know where they are. And you think, oh, that's it. They're all going to go nuts. Oh, it's called The Descent because they're descending into madness and they're all going to kill each other. And it's like, once it gets to that point, then the creatures come in and it becomes a whole different movie, and it becomes even more terrifying.
And this is such a special, fantastic, effective horror movie. We've largely talked about the creatures, but this would still be an A+ without the creatures somehow.
Exactly.
Like, there's enough horror in the setting, the way they construct it, the darkness, the unknown. Everything is so sharp. There's no path. There are panic attacks characters are having while they're stuck in these tiny little clearings.
Gosh,
even
awful.
Just poking your head in and seeing the dust poke out. And then someone like shoves their whole body through there.
Absolutely not.
The film maintains this incredible varied tension throughout its entire very short runtime. And all of these ingredients just stack up perfectly. This is one of those rewatchable, perfectly executed all-time horror movies.
Absolutely. And it wasn't even just, I mean, the setting and the concept alone are fantastic. What also for me really like took this movie the extra mile was the characters. Number one, this is and this has been talked about a lot, but this is an all-female cast. I mean, you have a man at the very beginning, but that's like, there are no men in this movie, and I guess some of the creatures are male. But all of our characters are female, and you don't get that very much in horror. And when you do, it's not like this. It's like, it's something like like Black Christmas, which is great. We love that movie. We talked about it as one of our Substack exclusive episodes in December. Great movie. But that's treated in a much more like stereotypical screaming girls kind of way, which is fun in its own way. But this treated its characters like human beings.
And it gives them full worlds and feelings. And they're not just the girl characters. Like,
yes, it wasn't about them being women.
A modern version of this would have been a really clumsy allegory where the monsters represent men.
Oh my God.
Like leering.
The real enemy is the patriarchy.
It would have been like a male gaze thing of like them being stalked and leered and followed.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's like a point to be made there.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
But aren't you already tired of it just from those three?
Already,
like, you kind of get it?
Yes, this instead was just, it treated its characters like human beings. And it treated them it's how women are when they're in groups around each other. Like before they go into the cave, there's a scene where they're all in this cabin like the night before, and they're like, they've been friends for a long time, and they're just hanging out, drinking, chatting, like flitting in between talking about like serious real trauma, and then joking about an ugly pair of pajamas and like boyfriends and stuff, and just flitting it around that, having that intimacy and the amount of laughter. I was like, I mean, in my experience, that is what it's like being around your group of friends, of girlfriends who you've known for years. Like that's
when you're adults.
When you're an adult,
right.
like that's exactly what it's like. And there's all the awkwardness of some people don't get along as well. Some people don't know each other as well. There are years of weird tensions built up that you try to move past because you're adults and you're trying to have this shared experience. And then watching it all unravel when things go wrong in the cave also felt very realistic to me, because it wasn't like immediate hatred and like backstabbing, but it also wasn't like, oh no, it's all fine. Like it just felt like how people would react, women would react in that situation.
I want to go deeper into that idea, but I'm going to have to spoil some things. So
okay,
if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. But now we're going to talk about some of the spoilers, including a comparison to The Ritual, which we did as last year's part of that Summerween series of horror movies.
Yes.
So we have a bunch still to get to, but I sort of have to spoil some things.
Okay,
to make a point.
That's fine. I mean, at this point, if you're still listening, you go watch it.
You've made your decision.
Yeah.
So character tension. It's exactly what I was about to transition into. You did a beautiful job there. And The Descent has a plot that is not as prominent compared to the immediate survival concerns. There's not as much allegory or commentary or pretext. It has that immediacy of, no, we need to not die down here or be killed by those things, which is sort of what you were just getting to, and me with that silly allegory point. But the film does hook you. And Sarah, who's the main character, her trauma and loss and her husband's possible affair with Juno is present throughout the story.
Yes.
But I love the way it fades. It fades from the immediate concerns of the narrative and then slips back in those quiet little character moments.
Yes.
Like Juno, in her own character, she's very dominant amongst this group. And you don't just see her sort of peacocking in front of everyone else. In those moments, you remember, oh, there might be something between these two.
Yes.
Does she know? Does she know? Like, it brings that subplot back to the surface in a different context. It's wonderfully efficient storytelling.
Yeah.
And comparing that sort of fearful respect that everyone gives Juno to this unanimous pity and kid gloves that everyone's treating Sarah with.
Yeah.
It heightens that tension and that gulf between those characters. So as you slowly winnow down the cast until it's just the two of them left, I was so excited for what it was going to build to.
Yeah.
Because I knew it couldn't be a simple confrontation, but that was also what it was seemingly building to as we lost everyone else. Like, there was a moment where I thought, well, Juno kind of has plot armor in this moment where she can't die because she has to survive until this confrontation.
Right.
And the realization as the credits start to roll is that moment never explicitly comes.
Yes, I was going to say, I love that there's no final, like, saying it outright confrontation.
Right.
Like, at no point does she admit to an affair, and at no point does Sarah accuse her of an affair.
But Sarah does, like, murder and abandon her.
Yes, because she finds the necklace,
and
she is told, like, slightly wrong information from Beth, who Beth thinks that Juno killed her. If you haven't seen the movie in a while, Beth is the one who Juno turns around and, thinking it's a creature, stabs her in the head or in the neck with an axe, like a pickaxe. And she thinks it was done on purpose. So when she's bleeding out, dying, and Sarah walks by, she says, "Don't trust her," meaning Juno, and hands her Juno's necklace, which has the phrase that reveals the husband's words. So it's clear that they were having an affair. So Sarah finds out that way. But again, it's never said. Right. I think another kind of horror movie would have like either had a flashback or would have had Sarah say something like, "So he was having an affair," right. or like have her go to Juno and be like, "I knew it," or like have a flashback to her saying, in the cabin 40 minutes ago, "Love each day."
Clumsy.
Like it would have not trusted you, but this movie trusted you so much. Number one, it trusted you to not introduce the main threat until like an hour into the film. Number two, it trusted you to remember that like offhand. I mean, not offhand. It's made pretty obviously important in the cabin scene, but it's not like that scene is more about, oh yeah, Sarah's the wet blanket because her husband died. Like it's less about the phrase that her husband used to say, and it's more about, oh, Sarah's life sucks, and you're kind of made to forget about it. And I just think it's done in such a beautiful way, and I really appreciate when creators trust their audience to keep up.
The echo is fascinating because Sarah murders and abandons Juno for betraying a mutual friend, but it's not the husband.
Right, like that seems to be what really, like, the husband thing she's clearly upset about, but
because Sarah, like, she betrayed and abandoned Sarah after she betrayed her by possibly sleeping with the husband, and then abandoned her after he died.
Yeah, because she didn't talk to her, right?
So you're echoing both parts of this grievance.
Yes, and I like that Sarah's like character arc because she starts out as this really like weak, afraid, like sad, traumatized person.
Right.
Yeah. And she's like, they had to like convince her to go on this trip. She's the one who has the panic attack in the tunnel, and she, but instantly, another kind of movie could have like made her grow into this hero who saves Juno, and she gets them both out of the cave. And then it's gal pals forever.
I was waiting for you to use the word girl boss.
Girl boss. Like, whoa. Like, it could have been that, which I think could be a really nice ending. Like, we love when women support each other and take care of each other. But I think given the state of things, the situation, the trauma, I think her ending her story by killing and abandoning her friend as payback for not only like payback for sleeping with the husband, for taking them on this trip and taking them to this cave that she knew had not been explored before and didn't tell them.
She doomed the whole group here.
It's all her fault. And she thinks she killed Beth. So she's like, no. That's too many things. Like, you're done.
But they don't confront that central thing between them. They don't confirm the affair. So it's a culmination of all of these suspicions and resentments, but it's not explicit. And so the final shot of the movie is that sort of ghost scare where she's in the car driving away, and then this sort of echo of Juno yells from the passenger seat.
Yes.
Obviously, Juno's not there.
Obviously not.
But I love that as sort of a doubling down of the, I don't know, subconscious preoccupation she had about this possibility throughout the movie.
Yes.
Because her whole arc was her moving past the trauma of what had happened with the husband and the daughter.
Yeah.
And now, as much as she is starting a new life and that she did survive this horrible ordeal, I love that it's nodding to the new baggage she's going to have to move through.
Yeah, because what they could have done instead is had Sarah, again, do this turn, kill Juno, and then escape. And then it's like, she like goes and like drives off to a pub and has a beer and is like, yeah, man, I'm a survivor now, man. I'm healed from my trauma. I'm badass.
The sunglasses?
Yeah, but instead it was like her escape is so interesting because she's like shaking, terrified. Like her immediate reaction is to jump in the car and drive as far away as possible.
Terribly, messily. She's
horribly,
like she's driving on a field of ice.
Because it could have had her like being in the car and then there's like there's cool music playing and she's like all calm and she's like, I'm driving away because I'm a badass.
Last time I go cave dive, like
but it wasn't that. So
I'll stick to rock climbing from now.
Oh my god! So instead, it was like it was the cyclical nature of trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, and like so it felt very grounded, even though this is a completely absurd plot.
But it's one of those. It's such a quick, efficient, subtle way of not doing that disservice to your audience of the
Right.
character arc is overcoming trauma and then everything's fine.
Right.
It's acknowledging that mental health is more complicated
Right.
and long-lasting than
And it's
that.
like kind of punishing her for this terrible thing she did down in the cave, because now
Sure.
she's going to be haunted by Juno forever. But she escaped, although we should say in the UK version she did not in fact escape.
Right.
In the UK ending she escapes and then wakes up and actually she never escaped.
And the guy's from the UK who made it, so
Yeah,
I
he
don't know
actually-
if we should make that version canon.
Yeah.
There is a sequel, which
Ignores the UK ending.
but it brings back a lot of these characters in flashbacks. Someone who worked on the movie, I don't remember his role. He was he moved up to be the director of that one.
Yeah.
I don't know. We might watch it at some point, but
Sure.
interesting that this
Yeah.
did continue.
Yeah.
And good for them.
Yeah.
Good for everyone involved.
But the whole point is I love Sarah's character arc.
Right,
Like
right.
I think it is so interesting and satisfying. Like it's satisfying while being like realistic. Do you know what I mean? I thought I really, really appreciated it.
And maybe the point to end it on, and this is more of a theory, so bear with me again,
Oh,
but
boy.
it's to compare
Please tell
this...
me there's no Dr. Faustus.
No.
I'll push you into a cave
I-
if that's what you're about to say.
I really wanted to structure this comparison between the Descent and the Ritual.
Oh,
I think
yes.
they are fascinating counterparts. The Ritual, of course, came out 12 years after this one.
Yes.
And even the book The Ritual is based on came out 6 years after this.
Oh, okay.
So there's a clear lineage, which is fine.
Yeah.
And I'm not at all making the point that either movie is reductive. They're fantastic and different, but they're also exactly the same.
They're
So
the exact same movie. Yeah.
So-
I'm with you there.
The Ritual is an all-male cast hiking in a foreign country with the protagonist unspooling massive trauma.
Yes.
The Descent is an all-female cast cave diving in a foreign country with a protagonist unspooling massive trauma.
They're also both British.
They both, yeah, of course. They both have kind of subtle connections that tie the supporting cast to the protagonist's big trauma.
Yes.
And because they're sort of all male or all female, the groups have sort of a safe quality because
Yeah.
there's not that like possibility. I mean, everyone is seemingly straight.
Yeah.
There's not a possibility of,
I mean, except Holly. I don't know why they pretended like Holly wasn't gay, but
but
whatever.
it's never a plot point.
Yeah, right.
I mean, people feel that sort of relaxed feeling when you're around people and
Yes.
there's no possibility of dating. Like when
Yes.
you're around relatives.
Yes.
There's just, it's simple.
Yes,
It's
like
safe.
that element that's not a factor,
Sure.
and it's not a concern, it's not a worry, it's not a point of anxiety. It's just not there.
And
Yeah.
within that safety, these friend groups and dynamics, they feel so remarkably real. The chemistry is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
You testified to that for The Descent, and I remember saying the same thing for The Ritual, almost recognizing
Yeah.
these feelings and interactions.
If you compare the dialogue, I mean, they're different movies and different writers, so there's one thing. But number two, the dialogue among the men is so different than the dialogue among the women,
but with
and
the
they're
same
both
intimacy.
well, exactly. Like they're like I feel like The Ritual, that's how men talk with each other.
Right, right.
And The Descent, that's how women talk with each other. Not in a stereotypical way, just in a like true to life, honest way.
Very untheatrical.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things we praised at the time in The Ritual is that
Yeah.
incredibly naturalistic, immersive dialogue that makes the group, even though the setting is strange and out there, it makes the world feel so lived in.
Right.
And you can get things like power struggles and hierarchies from the subtlest of looks.
Yeah.
Or Sarah just kind of leaning to a side, not engaging with something Juno's doing. You see, oh, there's years of something there.
Yeah. Or
It's-
just like weird looks between them. Yeah.
It just feels lived in. So
Yeah.
both of these movies, with very similar structures, end with their tormented protagonist escaping the bad creatures out onto an open road and finding a car, and all of their friends die.
Yeah.
They're both about an hour and a half, and they have this, and then there were nun-style dwindling casts as they're all picked up.
Right. Yeah.
Both movies wait a long time to start
okay.
picking off their supporting cast, which is another thing you and I seem to enjoy lately.
Yes.
It really heightens our investment.
Yeah.
Both movies feature creatures that are vague, visually stunning, silent, and almost have a mythological quality.
Totally. You know what else? They both feature one of the characters injures their leg.
That's true.
In The Ritual, that's
Yeah.
the guy's, I think it's his knee, if not his ankle. I don't remember. And then this one, this girl's femur. But yeah.
And those comparisons, none of those comparisons are an insult to either film. I think they're,
Right.
and they're not pointed out to suggest any lack of originality. I think the comparisons and the differences in execution between the two films make them both richer.
Yes.
Because you get their respective insights about men or women.
Yeah.
And you get, for all these similarities, remarkably different tones to their horror. So
Yeah.
for The Ritual, you have this ethereal folk horror.
Yes.
Which is very focused on the idea of the unknown, which is at once intriguing and possibly dangerous.
Yes.
We just talked about this with Skinamarink. And that horror in The Ritual is revealed in fragments, in puzzle pieces, literally in runes carved into trees,
Yeah.
in whispers, in lore that they have to piece together. In The Descent, completely different story. It's visceral. It's a slasher movie with chase scenes and jump scares, primal hunting monsters, these like mutated human things. It's a hunt.
Sure.
It's more like The Purge than it is like The Ritual
Right.
in that respect. And those creatures are revealed via fragments
Yeah.
of teeth and eyes and arms and
Right.
saliva, instead of the lore buildup in The Ritual that leads to just a clean reveal of that weird deer thing.
Yeah, and it's still about the unknown because it's all about being in the dark and you don't know what's down there. But in a totally different settings and totally
And
different tones.
there is no lore. There is no real context or explanation.
Right.
At the
it's
best,
just some people evolved down
right.
there.
And they try to
Yeah.
cobble that together. They sort of just make assumptions, but there's no clear moment of, oh, we know exactly what we're up against.
Yeah,
and
they don't find the Necronomicon that explains what these
exactly,
creatures are.
or the weakness.
Yeah.
The priority is survival, hiding and killing them. It almost goes back to Alien
Yeah.
more than it goes back to like a Lovecraftian thing.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So yeah, interesting comparison.
Yeah, they're both really good movies. I recommend them both. It's interesting that we watched the later one first. I wonder how
Sure.
that would have affected the other one, like our viewing of them both. But I think The Ritual for me was scarier than The Descent was scarier than The Ritual for me. I don't know about
Okay.
you. I mean, The Ritual was pretty freaky, but The Descent was like, whew. It
both-
really upset me. It was good.
They were both pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah. I really loved this. I will say, score is not the best. So you have to kind of look past
It's
the
a
score.
little jarring.
It's just it doesn't.
It feels like a 2005 movie.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like apart from the score, this movie really feels like not of its time.
Pretty
Like,
timeless. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, apart from like the haircuts of the women, but like just the style of it, the tone of it, the way the characters are written and treated, like it doesn't feel like a 2005.
No, it
movie.
feels like an A24 horror. And it's
Yeah.
weird to then have sort of an orchestral score come in at certain moments. It just
Yeah,
I don't know,
it just felt like
clashed
it
a
wasn't
little.
it wasn't trusting in itself to be scary enough. It felt like the studio was like, we need a bigger score moment right here, and I'm
right.
like, it doesn't work for me. So you just have to push past that.
when
But
in doubt, blame studio interference.
that's what I always like to do.
Yeah.
I will say I am very, very thankful that I have already once in my life gone down into the Paris catacombs. That I did that before seeing this movie, because I will never go underground ever again after watching this movie, because
So-
that was awful.
Here's a little kind of homework assignment to leave you guys with. Do you know of any other sort of cave horror, weird, claustrophobic, underground? Like, what else should we watch in this weird little subgenre?
Yeah, because turns out that's a deep fear I didn't know I had, and I would love to
because
dig into that more.
You've seen one.
I've seen As
one.
Above, So Below, which
And-
is about the Paris catacombs,
And
which I
how-
also saw after going actually to that place.
Were there any similarities between that and this?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference is that it's a found footage film.
Mm-hmm.
But there are definitely, I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, it's similar. It's actually a bit weirder.
Not as claustrophobic, I imagine.
Oh no, it's claustrophobic because of the found footage. And so you feel like
okay.
your field of vision is very small and you can't
Okay.
see everything in the same way that, like, in Blair Witch, you can't quite see everything.
Right, but it's not like a tiny little cave that you're trying to squeeze
Well,
your
I
body through.
mean, there are some elements of
Okay,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's one that I really want you to see. It's really, really good. I mean, it's a lot to watch, like, physically, because it's very, like, I know you get motion sickness and stuff.
I was
but
fine during Blair Witch. Maybe that
Well,
was
this is
something I aged out of.
This is a lot worse than Blair Witch in
I don't
terms
know.
of motion
I
sickness.
think
but
I think I just saw The Bourne Supremacy when I was a kid, and that just like overwhelmed me in the theater.
what about Hunger Games?
Because
Did that one
there's
ruin
that
you?
shaky cam car chase for like 35 minutes, which is fantastic.
There
but,
are some scenes where there's a lot of shaky cam, but
I
there's also a lot where there's not.
think I can deal. We'll
you know
try it.
what? As Above, So Below, for me, is a combination of The Descent and The Mummy.
Mummy?
That's the vibe of this movie. There's like an adventurer, like, funness to it, but it's
Is it that romantic and inspiring?
No, but
Infectious
like
joy?
in terms of like the aesthetics and the vibe, like some of it's there.
Adventure?
Yeah. There's some adventure. I mean, it turns very bad.
That is such high praise. I'm
Yeah,
dubious.
you got to see that movie. I mean,
Okay.
I saw it. I don't know. I was in grad school. It's really, really good.
All right.
We should watch it.
It's a high bar. Well, Maggie says that's the best movie ever made. Have you seen The Descent? What did you think of it? Let us know.
Yeah. Other movies like that, tell us. I'm sorry. You just looked at me with such disappointment.
It was a glance at best. Second Breakfast Pod everywhere. Substack is the most important one because you can get bonus episodes. We do one a month. We did
Black Christmas.
Yes, which was December and January. We just did one on Tarantino tension, where I had this big sweeping theory, pulling together 3 Tarantino movies to kind of track how he develops tension in his movies over multiple decades.
Yeah, it was lots of fun.
We do lots of those. You're supporting the show. There's a backlog of bonus episodes now. So cool.
Yeah,
and
check us out.
We'll be back next Friday at the very least, with the next chapter in our ongoing Witcher coverage.
Totally.
Cool.
Well, thanks everyone. Don't go exploring caves. It's dangerous. The rule that we really come away with every time we watch a horror movie, just don't leave your house.
Don't ever leave the house.
But actually don't live in a house either, because sometimes your house is haunted.
That's
just don't
true.
exist.
Or a home invasion.
Just
Funny Games, The
don't,
Purge.
Right. Just don't be.
Don't be.
That's the answer. That's what we'll leave you with.
Have a good weekend. Thanks for listening. Don't be.
Bye.